Dear all, welcome to our first podcast by SpaceTech and Gulf. In this podcast, we are cover the latest news in the space and defense industry in the Gulf region. And our first episode is with Dr. Luca Rossettini, CEO and founder of D-Orbit. D-Orbit is an Italian space logistics company founded in 2011, and it is best known for the ION satellite carrier that deploys satellites precisely into the target orbits. Dr. Luca, thank you so much for being with us today. And I will start with the very traditional questions about the goals, dreams, and reasons that brought you to the space industry. So please let us know what inspired you to start the orbit and how you ended up here in the region.
So first of all, Alex, thank you very much for having me here, and also I'm even more honored to be here since it's the first of many podcasts that you are going to record in the future. So it's wow. So I feel the pressure of being the first, and also it's good to see you after a long time. So it's really great. It's really great for me. Interesting question what you asked. So what motivated me? In reality, my goal was always to go to space. You know, as many kids when they are very young, they want to become astronauts. I did try to become a astronaut in Europe. In Europe, you have one chance in a life, and you have to study a lot. You have to put all the tick in the boxes in order to get there. And well, I'm not an astronaut, so it didn't happen. And then I have to find another way to go to space. And at a certain point, I realized that without a solid logistic infrastructure in orbit, there will be basically no space economy. And logistics is not just transportation of goods and people into the right place in orbit. It's also distribution of energy, distribution of information. I mean, we live in a cloud and we need an infrastructure, a cloud infrastructure in orbit. And this will enable so many different businesses and the very fast advancement in the, let's call it interplanetary society, but even today, it's going to be a big advantage for us that are on Earth. So, and basically the orbit is expressing all of that. Of course, we are doing just 1% of what we want to achieve in the future, but it's going, step by step, it's going exactly in the right direction.
Okay. And how the orbital transportation evolved since 2011, right? And what makes your approach unique on the market? Because again, we see lots of kind of projects. Of course, we know SpaceX and so on. Even the Middle East, there are like several projects that are developing rockets. So how's your approach is unique comparing to them?
Yeah, well, let's say the idea of space logistics came, like as you said, in 2011, but at that time there was not even, I'm not talking the market was not there, but even the technology was not there. So we had to say, okay, how can we work today in order to create the capabilities that I will need tomorrow that will develop additional capabilities that I will need the day after tomorrow, right? So we use like a strategic framework. It's called the natural step framework. We started from the vision, and instead of focusing on technology, we focus on markets. So basically, going backwards, we said, okay, what is the market that will enable the market, that will enable the market, that will enable the vision? Until we ended up in the first day, that was 2011, and then we faced a big issue. We couldn't use any of the technologies that was used in space. It was too heavy, too expensive, and very difficult to procure, long lead time, and not very performing. So we had to screen all the different technologies from other sectors: automotive, industrial, washing machine, oil and gas, and so on, energy. And then we ended up building what was the core of the technology that, by the way, we are still using. Of course, we evolved the technology, but they say that principle stayed into the orbit since the very beginning. So now the logistics, it's funny because now everybody, take it for granted when you design a constellation, now you know that you can use the logistics services to optimize the
Hmm.
constellations since the beginning. But when we started it, this is something at the business school they tell you never to do. Don't invent new market. And I think they are right. It's crazy tough. Even the customers that are flying with us recurrently,
Hmm.
uh, at the beginning they say, Luca, thank you, but no, thank you. We don't need this service, right? So, because it's not so, when you invent a new market, it's not really understanding what is the pain that the customers know to have. It's understanding the pain that they don't know they have because they are still doing their business in a different way, in slow. It's like to say, when the car was invented,
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
all those that were using chariots, say, look, do you want a car? Say, well, I have my chariot, I don't need a car. Then you need to show, they need to test it. That was the difficult part. So bring them into orbit and basically use them as evangelists. The second and the third customers were brought by the first one, and then the fourth and the fifth were brought by the second, and so on. So there was a word of mouth that actually helped us a lot. So the unicity, I can tell you a lot about the technology. So far, and let me touch wood. So far, we have 100% track record. So we are beyond the typical statistics in space, right? So every launch is wow. But it's definitely there's a lot of technology redundancies how you design like the space vehicle. But in reality, what is even more important is the team you have, the people you have. So whatever happens in space, and always something happens.
Yep.
Even if you work with ESA, NASA, or like space agencies, you ended up with a vehicle that is extremely expensive, but still something can happen. So you need to have a very good team that is fast and smart to analyze all the data and provide the solutions. And I have to say, we have a great team that is helping us on that. So it's not just technology; it's technology, people, and of course the attention that you want to give to the customer. So if you
Hmm.
start with the objective of designing a satellite, sooner or later that satellite will have an issue. If you start with the idea of saying, dear customer, I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring you where you're asking me to bring, then of course this is a very big driver for the technology design. So are we perfect? No, Alex, we are not perfect. We do our mistake. Oh, I did a lot of mistakes in the past, but having a team that is capable of intervening and solve the problems, I think it's really the number one point.
Look, I believe that lots of young guys and startups will be looking this podcast. So I have two questions. First of all, what was your way to get first customer? Right? Was it like how did you do it? So it was MVP, and you showed the plan. It was achieved, or you showed the product and so on. That's first question. And second question, all of the startups are struggling with first money. So, what was your approach back to 2011, right? To get first money to start this business.
Yeah. So the first question is interesting because at a certain point, when we developed the first product, there was a
Hmm.
decommissioning device, like an intelligent motor. Basically, you plugged into an existing satellite, so a satellite before launch, and is capable of removing a satellite even if the satellite is dead. It was a very good piece of technology, unique in the market. But still, no one want to use it because the satellite operator was saying, "Oh, have you flown already?" And we
Hmm.
said, "No." I said, "Okay, I don't want to put a bomb on my satellite." Right? So first you fly, you demonstrate that it's working, then we discuss. But the issue is that no one wanted to fly. At that time, there were no IOD, IOV as they are called today, in orbit validation and orbit demonstration. And so at a certain point, we said, okay, if we don't test this device in orbit, then no one is going to buy it. So let's build our own satellites in order to test it. And what happened? So we were lucky in a sense. So we had no money
Hmm.
to finish the satellites, and we were supposed to fly with NASA through a CASIS that basically gave us a free launch. But even NASA said, I don't want to put a satellite with a motor into the space station, right? So it was too risky. Even if we did all the homework, all the safety, the range safety and the ground. Anyway, it was not enough to convince them. So we have to find our own way. In order to retrieve some of the money, we let other customers to fly with us. They paid us
Mhm.
to fly. And and that actually worked very well. So now, so basically, we start doing IoT, IOV before anyone else. I mean, in a more structured way.
Yeah, yeah.
And thanks to those customers and to the fact that we flew already something, that was, the key to start the conversation. That was not enough, Alex, anyway, because when you do something new, then of course you start again, say, well, you should show us. So we with the very first customer, we use a different approach. We said, instead of delivering all the services all together, why
Mhm.
don't we focus on the first one and we give it away with a big discount? So we went to a
Mhm.
satellite operator and he said, look, how much do you spend on like to fly your satellites today? And I said, what if I give you a discount on that? And then I give you an additional discount if you test my first service.
Mhm. Mhm.
They did it. And you know what happened? As soon as we deployed their satellites, they called me and said, Luca, we want to launch another 70 satellites on like in 4 months after. And I didn't have the vehicle, I didn't have the money to build the vehicles to satisfy. I had only one. And what we did every time, we said, okay, now this service is proven. So now you pay for this at full price.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you know what? I give you the possibility of testing another layer of service. Again, in that case, a very big discount. So my customers basically are more partners than just customers
Mhm.
because they let me evolve the models, testing the services, of course, at a very good price. And in this way, we were able to maximize the use of our technology. And that's basically what we continuously do. Every time we fly, we have a piece of new technologies of our own that we test at the end of the mission. So we do the full mission as something that is, safe and reliable, and then at the end, then we test our own technology. So
Mhm.
at the next flight, we can use that technology. So thinking in these terms, so selling something that is ready today, but designing this in order to be ready for the future, I think it's very important to get the customers, and then you need to work with them really side by side. At the beginning, it's tough, but it's like that. It's different if you are selling, I don't know, an improvement of technology. Then in that case, you need to focus on the improvement and the customers will listen to you. So that's a different story. The second question. So, the true story there is that in the first 10 years of life, we raised only 10 million. I do remember there was one year in United States I was talking with this investor and he started blaming. He said, Luca, what you are telling me is all bullshit. I don't believe you. You are a fraud because it's impossible that you did what you are claiming to have done with this amount of money, right? But Europe is not US.
Yeah.
So in Europe, you don't have the money, but then you have to use the brain. I mean, it's not that in US they don't use the brain, but of course they have also the money, right? In Europe, you have to take care of yourself. So it was tough, very, very tough. I think I spoke up to date to 680 investors in my life, most of them at the very beginning. And as you can imagine, like 99% of them, they said, oh, cool, but we are not investing. So it was really tough. And you have to, I made a bet with the first investor. I said, look, you don't believe in what I'm telling you. So you're asking me, like, you give me a little money in exchange of a big portion of the company. But what if I'm right? Right? So
Mhm.
let's make a bet. I give you what you're asking. I give you a big, big chunk of the company. But if I'm right and the market appears and we are, really delivering, then you give me back the shares, a certain amount at least.
Mhm.
And that's how we convince the first investor. And then the second one, jump on board because they start seeing some results. Then you start seeing revenues, right? So we have to sell since the beginning something because
Yeah.
we didn't have the luxury of having the capital, and that helped a lot also the mentality in the team to always find a solution for anything. I think this approach, at least for us, worked. Now we have to take into consideration that we live in a different era. So now the market shows way more investors, especially at the seed level, seed around A. So startups will have an easier life. But my suggestion to them, doesn't matter that it's easier to find money. Money is still money. So first of all, money comes with a color. So remember that whoever give you money can become like the strongest ally that you ever imagine because it's basically your brother into the company, or it can become a barrier. So you have to
Yeah.
select them very well. And second, the money in the bank account, it's the only thing that matters to you. So if you don't have money in the bank account, you have no company. So focus a lot on the cash
Hmm.
flow, and make sure that you control that as much as possible. That is true even for a company like me. Every morning I wake up and I check the bank account. So of course now I'm very happy, but in the past, when you start seeing only 1 0, then you start be extremely worried because you have to pay the salaries at the end of the month.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes, yes. Look, it's very actually a good statement, and it brings me another question about if you would start in 2026 instead of 2011, would you succeed in your point of view?
it's a good question. Probably, I don't know how to answer to this question, but the way that I have is, we did a lot of mistakes in the first years of the companies. Thanks to those mistakes, we are now today what we are. And the mistakes that we are going to do in the following years will help us again to evolve. So if I start in 2016 without having done those mistakes, because you have to do mistakes when you can afford those mistakes. So if you
Hmm.
sign a contract of $10,000 and your mistake, let's say it's 10%, it's $1,000. You can afford it because I can take out the money from my own pockets. But if you sign a contract of 220 million and you do 10%, it's 22 million. You go bankrupt the day after,
Yeah.
right? So I think you need to do mistakes that are affordable for the stage of growth in which you are. So if you cut some of them, then it's more risky. So that's my answer. So it's not like a comprehensive answer of what you asked, but it gives you an idea that I think
Hmm.
you have to start at the right time. It's difficult to start like to imagine what to do if you start later, and you have to build on every error that you did, and you have to do it only once, right, per type.
So mistakes are okay, right? That's the main kind of statement, and without mistakes, there is no growth, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
Last week, no, 10 days ago, this European startup asked me if I could put them in contact with an early stage investor in the United
Mhm.
States. And typically, what I do, I call first investor to say, are you interested? And this guy asked me, okay, but what about the entrepreneur? Let's call him Jack. What about Jack? How many times did he fail so far? And I said, well, no, I think it's the first startup. Oh, it's the first. He never failed. I don't know if I'm going to invest, right?
Yeah.
Because if you fail, you know what it takes to fail. You went
Mhm.
through a lot, right? So I think there is of course, you don't have to fail every time, but there's a lot of value on failure, on mistakes. If you are good enough to learn, to be humble and say, yes, I did a mess. Now let's recover and fix it.
Mhm. Agree with you. Okay, let's move to the next one. So, as I understood, please correct me if I'm wrong. So, this bus, how it's called, Ion Satellite Carrier, right? So, it's a flagman project, flagman product, right? But also, you're doing data centers in space, right? So, you're doing computing in space and so on. Can you tell more about this one? Because this topic is very, say, popular these days, right? And there are lots of pro and contra about those technologies and so on. If you could tell us a little bit more about this and the future of this technology and maybe reliability of this technology as well.
Yeah, so let's let's describe it in this way. I mentioned, this interplanetary society, right? So let's give a like an image out of that.
Hmm.
Imagine to be able to connect Mars, the asteroid belt, Moon, and Earth through a logistic infrastructure capable of transporting goods, people, information, and energy. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, you will not be able to have it, right? So at that point, how you get there? Well, first of all, you need bigger spacecraft that you cannot build on Earth, right? So, in order to build bigger spacecraft, you need orbital manufacturing. But
Hmm.
then the orbital manufacturing need raw material. But raw material can come from recycling stations in orbit that will recycle all the debris and the satellites. But how can you grab the waste? How can
Hmm.
you provide like space waste management? You need vehicles with robotic arm that go and grab the waste and bring them to the recycling station to produce the raw material for the bigger orbital like vehicle.
Yeah.
But at that point, you will have a lot of these vehicles. That, by the way, we are building one right now. It's going to be the first in Europe. This in-orbit servicing vehicle will have very complex missions. Every time, it's going to be a different mission. So imagine to have dozens of hundreds of them in orbit. In order to control all of them, you will need like probably hundreds of people on ground. That's not really smart. So, and on top of that, you have another issue. The more is the maneuver is complex, the more computational power you
Hmm.
need. More computational power, more energy, bigger solar panels, more mass, more structure, and then you pay more. So at a certain point, you have the cost that is going to reach the price, and then at
Hmm.
that point, there is no market anymore. So we ask ourselves, okay, how can we solve this? And then the idea came from the daily life in a company. So I had my lead mechanical engineer. So at that time we were using very big computers, like
Hmm.
2,000 euro computers, and we were changing them every 6 months.
Hmm.
And then every month they start complaining that the computer was not fast enough. So what did we do? We switched to the cloud. Now everybody's using laptops, 400 euro laptops, right? So, and then no one is complaining because if they want more power, more computational power, they just use it.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, wow, we can do something similar. We can create a cloud infrastructure that is capable of supporting all the activities in orbit. What we are doing today in reality is serving the earth, right? So we find out that actually there's a very good use of this cloud infrastructure. It's intrinsically more secure, but also you can basically reduce by 98% the amount of data that you typically need to download to have the very same information. So if you work in let's say there is a natural disaster, typically today, using satellite data, it takes between 8 hours up to 4 days to warn the civil protection. But with this system, you can warn it in minutes. So you can save life. If you are a defense, of course, you don't even need to download the images anymore. You just send the GPS coordinate to the vehicle. You enable machine to machine. So there are a lot of new activities that are coming, a lot of new ideas that are attached to this infrastructure. And every time we fly an ion, we basically add a node of this infrastructure.
Hmm.
And so of course, it's a slow progress because there are no investments in the cloud. But now, thanks to Bezos, Elon, and Google that basically are talking about that, now it became normal. So
Hmm.
thanks, guys. After many years that we are struggling to promote the cloud computing in orbit, now I have to see that everybody's understanding the value.
I see, I see. Okay, so you're building quite a lot of, say, new technologies that really need to lots of explanation and ecosystem kind of building and involvement around it. Let us know about the partnership management. So how do you, what's your say approach to making those partnerships? I assume it's not only in the European Union, but worldwide, right? And as I know, based on the podcast we talk about before we start recording, right? So there are like several offices around the globe: Portugal, UK, Greece, US, Japan, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, what is the goal of expanding, right? And and attitude towards partnerships and so on.
Yeah, so there are different level of partnership. The partnerships
Mhm.
that we do are when we need to build, let's say, a new layer of infrastructure that, of course, we cannot do everything by ourselves. So we are working with other startups to test their technologies and see if this is the right one and helping them to succeed independently from us, right? So if you develop, I don't know, a new laser communication system, yes, you pay me, I can help you to test it in orbit, but then I'm not really obliging you to work only with me, right? So you are free to go and address all the markets. It's because it's a benefit for the entire ecosystem. And the goal is that expand the ecosystem as fast as possible. How can we have not just Europe, let's say Russia, India, United States, China, to have access to space, right? So how can we make sure that access to space is for everyone? So we need to accelerate the adoption of the expansion of this space ecosystem, this new space ecosystem. So this is another layer of partnership. So how we do that? But first of all, when you start working with the local government, so we started in Europe. Portugal offered us a very good opportunity. At that time, we won an MIT business plan competition. And then the finals were in Lisbon. And when we won the like 100,000 euro, that at that time was a lot of money, a local investor said, if you invest here in Portugal, I will double down the amount. And I said, wow, yes, let's do it. And that's Portugal. UK, thanks to the fact that Seraphim invested, so we were exposed to the UK market. Greece, again, the sovereign fund invested. So this level of partnership are very important, and you start understanding also the different culture of the different countries. United States, a little bit more opportunistic. It's the biggest market on the planet. We sell platform there. We have a very very solid team over there. But there is another level of partnership. It's how long does it take for a nation that has appetite for space
Yeah.
to get up to speed, to develop the ecosystem, to build all the technology, do all the mistakes, all the investments, and so on, and be able to like launch satellites, have a full 360 degrees market? Well, probably between 8 and 15 years, right? So that's
Mhm.
pretty much it. What if I come with my capabilities and then we work together in order to create the ecosystem? I come with my own money. I come with the IP. I come with the training. I come with the capabilities, and then together I come with the startups that want to come with me, right? So, and that's another model that we call distributed space that we are now adopting. By the way, in Saudi Arabia, that where we recently established a company there. That's a way not really to overcome, but to accelerate a path that has already been designed. And that's actually something that I think is extremely valuable because then you create innovative solutions that can help me as well. They call it win-win. For me, it's way more
Mhm.
than win because it's a 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah. So basically, you're bringing not only the orbit to the new market, but also the whole ecosystem with other partners, with other solutions, right? So it's done like this. Okay. You just mentioned Saudi Arabia. So basically, what brought you to the Middle East?
Well, Middle East is a very interesting region. If you think about in the aerospace and defense market, they are all between the first 20 markets on the planet, right? So Saudi, I think it's between fifth and seventh position, UAE 8, 9, then you have Qatar, then you have Bahrain, and so on.
Hmm.
Uh, and like as a single countries are interesting, but they don't have. So they started later in the space sector. So they do have an appetite for space. They do have a roadmap. So that's where I thought I can say I can increase my business, but also I can support, provide some acceleration to them. And you need to work with them. You need to have a lot of conversations at the decision-making level. And if they like the idea, then you can do great things. And of course, you need to be ready to take a bet, right? Because it's very easy to go in Middle East and say, give me a contract and then I give you the satellite. Very easy. Everybody can do that. But are you willing to say, invest your own money, bring your IP, and then, if you're good enough, then you will get some contract, right? So that's a different approach, but I like more this approach because it's like to say to the customers, look, test me.
Hmm.
Test me if I'm right. Test me if I'm good enough for you, right? So test me, and then if I'm good enough, then we can start talking about doing business together. And that's, I think, it's an approach that I like, and then it's working pretty well. So I believe Saudi, it's extremely interesting nowadays. They have a very good vision, a very clear path to get there. They also have competence. I realized that Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf region, was the first nation to send satellites in orbit, way before anyone else. And they still have some capabilities that we can leverage on. So, and also they are very open to have companies like the orbit, but also the companies that I want to bring with me. They are very happy if we bring foreign companies from all over the world, with no distinction, because they are kind of neutral with in the geopolitical systems, and so they can work with everyone, and that's actually extremely positive because you can create from zero an ecosystem that otherwise it would take several years. So that's why Saudi Arabia.
I see. I see. I see. Let me ask you some more precise questions about Saudi Arabia. So I know that when the company is opening the business and or allocating some IP and so on, so there will be some dependence on the local workforce, right? So how do you evaluate of workforce in Saudi Arabia, and what's basically your next steps, ideas about this topic?
Yeah, so first of all, it's not a completely virgin market, right? So
Mhm.
you can find very smart people already with competence, either that they develop in country or they went abroad, to work in some industries and then they came back, hoping for a job in the industry. And that's something that I think it's very important as an initial step, like step
Mhm.
zero. You still have a good ground that you can use to build on. Second, it's really setting up a proper training process. That's number one. Because many people coming out of the university from Saudi Arabia, but also from other countries, are basically flying away, right? So if they don't find a job in the industry, they go elsewhere, and they have the possibility of doing so. So what if I offer them the possibility of working in this industry in their own home country? This will be great. And so, and this is something that we saw in Europe as well. I mean, Europe, it's a little bit more developed in terms of space market, but still, we were able to attract people coming back from abroad,
Mhm.
just because we are offering them something new, right? So, a vision, an industry, steps for the future that are challenging, but still challenge for those people. It's good. So I'm expecting that there are these three layers. So the first one is already there. So we need to leverage on that. The second one you achieve with training. And then the third one, when you start the projects, that you will become attractive from all over the world. So you attract people. As a new companies, you always want to have, you want to see the hunger in the people. So someone that is, targeting the salary as an objective, not because we are not paying salaries, of course, but it's really the mentality. If you are targeting a salary, man, go to work for the software business. You can get a better salary there, right? So if you are targeting to change the world and create an interplanetary like business in space, then that's the right place because your effort is going to change the way we work.
I see. I see. What's the relation with the government right now? How do they support the initiative? Mm.
Yeah, so as I said, I think now we talk Saudi, but we can expand a little bit at the region level if you want. So they have a very strong vision. Of course, when the vision is very very bold, not all the steps can go through, right? So that's normal, and I'm not surprised if the change and the pivoting in some case that it's part of the natural evolution when you work on a vision. I mean, look at the orbit. If you find an obstacle, you don't stop. You just say, okay, I do a step back, I move aside, and then I pass the obstacle from another direction. And I think this has been demonstrated there. The resilience, it's very high. So, and this is consistent through all the government bodies that at least I have the honor to talk to. There's a lot of support for innovation, a lot of support. Of course, they were, in the past they they had to spend money. Now it's the time in which they realize that they have some capabilities that they can leverage. So if you really want to do business there with their support, you have to demonstrate that they are willing to invest. And that's, I think, it's a very good point that I appreciate. But so far, amazing support. Really amazing support. I have to say they are partners. They are not even customers because our goal is not really to stay in Saudi anyway.
Mhm.
So yes, it's a big market, but it's just a starting. You need some anchor tenancy there, otherwise you will not be able to sell outside of the country. But there are other big markets out there that you can tackle from there. It's the perfect place to be if you want to tackle certain type of market. So, and they understood that, and they are willing to support on that as well.
That's great. That's great. So for the international companies, other international companies that are willing to work with the Middle East or relocate to the Middle East, what advices can you give to those companies?
Yeah, so we did these mistakes in the past in other regions. So you think there's a big market,
Mhm.
you see the money, and then you go by yourself, and then suddenly you realize that you are spending a lot of money. All the timeline you had at the beginning is totally wrong. You were forecasting to sign a contract within 2 years, and it's already 4 years, and you are bleeding money from. So for younger companies, this could be very detrimental. So my suggestion is find a partner. We have a
Mhm.
local partner helping us a lot. Hussam, if he's listening, he's a great guy. He never gives up, and that's what you need. And you need a local partner, and then with a local partner, you can start building, and you save a lot of money in this way because the local partner knows how to do. That's also a matter of local culture. You need to understand the culture, and it takes time. And you will do a lot of mistakes. So that's why you need a partner to make it up when you do a mistake. So I think that's number one. Unless you are strong enough, you have a lot of money, then you want to do it by yourself, and then you go and hit the floor. But typically, younger companies, very innovative companies that they want to expand, they don't have these financing capabilities, and the time to wait for like years. So partner, it's the best choice.
I agree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. That's were all of my questions. Um,
Alex,
yeah, please,
sorry, can I add one additional element? Because since you asked about the
please.
Middle East, and I talk about Saudi, but I think there's one element that I would like to highlight that is part of the overall vision that we have in the region. And it's a little bit naive if you want, but I like to tell you because I think
Please.
this podcast is the right place to be a little bit more transparent, even if it looks like naive. So, if you look at how now the situation is in space, it's divided, right? So you have United States is the market number one, then you have China, of course, then you have Europe, and then you have all the other nations. India, it's becoming very very strong. And if you look at the region, the Middle East region, you find, yeah, we said Saudi, it's number five, number six, then you have UAE and so on. And what if they join together in the space sector? Then they will become highly competitive in the overall global arena, right? So then at that point, they become very, very strong. So what if Saudi is going to take care of like some part of the business, then maybe Qatar produce the payloads, Oman the launch, and UAE, I don't know. And so what if we are able to create something like that? Then you will have another important piece of the space arena, and this will extremely accelerate the progress that we all expect. Who works in space really wants to see space evolving. This will accelerate the evolution of space, and this will help other regions on this planet to do the same, to follow this example. So Africa created the African space agencies, right? So in South of America, they are also connecting the dots in order. So if you're able to do that, then everybody will have access to space, and then the speed will drastically increase. So this is a little bit naive because, of course, then decision makers are always thinking about something else, and we see nowadays what is happening. But let's keep in mind that from space there are no boundaries, and that's the final goal.
Look, it's not naive, absolutely. So we at Space Tech and Gulf are a strong advocate for this regional cooperation, like small ESA here in the region. So with the distribution, to support this, I can tell you that in 2025, basically last year, there was a project, a joint satellite, right, produced by UAE with the help by Bahrain, Oman, some other regional players. So we see the start, we see the projects like this. Of course, we need much more and really much more because we see we see the potential distribution of this. We see Oman as a launch pad for with the spaceport. We see UAE and Saudi with the capabilities and Earth observation, satellite building developments, and so on, so on. So lots of stuff. Let's hope to see it one day. So a big center for space in the region, like small ESA in the Middle East. So inshallah, let's see it.
Inshallah, and I learned that inshallah is not maybe will happen. It's inshallah means this is going to happen thanks to God, right? So when we say inshallah, it's because we all commit to make it happen. So yes, inshallah.
Inshallah, all will be good. And thank you so much for your time. I wish you good luck in the region. I wish you good luck with all the technologies you're developing. And I wish you all the partners be strong and have the same vision as you shared today with us. Thank you for being the first. It's always pleasure to speak with you. And to our audience, dear Space Tech space enthusiast, I wish you good luck and please subscribe and see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.